So I inserted an actual demonstration of mediumship video between this one and the last one. So in the last one before that, at the end of it, I said that if you can feel your deceased loved ones, then you can feel my deceased loved ones. Um, and that's true. Not everyone starts there. That is a good place to start. But if you're exploring mediumship for your own reasons, a great place that I highly recommend you start is on online circles. And there are groups on Facebook that organize practice circles all over the world. So there's something for everybody's schedule there. I don't want to name a specific group because I believe you're supposed to be led to your own path to that. So if you just search Facebook for mediumship development or evidential mediumship, you will find your way to a group, probably many groups. And they're great because it's mediums of all levels practicing on each other. So um, and sometimes there's just a regular everyday person who sits to be read as practice for people like us. So I guess this video is going to be about things I wish I had known before I started doing any of those circles. So first of all, there's two broad categories. There's development circles and practice circles. A development circle is where everyone is practicing a specific exercise, like working on clairaudience, which is being more aware of sound than anything else. And then practice circles are just practicing on each other. They can be anywhere from 4 participants to 20 or more. The more participants there are, the more likely you are going to use breakout rooms into smaller groups or even one-on-one, which is the most like an actual client situation. Typically your turn, when it's your turn to go, it's about 7 to 10 minutes each. You have to restrict the time because you could be on there forever. If you have 20 people each speaking for 40 minutes, that doesn't really work. So you'll feel that you have a connection and you can just say, I'll go next, or you can type in the chat, I'll go next, and that starts your time. I encourage you to think of that as your time and do not compare yourself to other people because there are all levels of development. And like beginning music lessons, some people take to it faster than others. So if you feel yourself connecting and you're only saying 2 things in those 7 minutes, that's fine. Don't compare yourself to other people. Just go at your own pace. I think these practice circles are critically important because you can use them and not practice or learn on the general public. Some people go to mediums because they think it's fun, it's interesting, it's fascinating, or they're curious about potentially their own mediumship. But a lot of people go to mediums because they are in grief. And if you get someone coming to you who, for example, has outlived their own child, you should not be practicing on their grief or learning on their grief. So these circles are great because everyone knows you're there to practice. We're practicing on each other, and it's okay to make mistakes, which you will do a lot of in the beginning. For me, I've learned things from brand new people and also from skilled tutors. In the beginning, for example, it was really good to see how other people connect. It was good to see how other people word things. So like I would just, when I would connect, I would just spit out everything that I was getting. So the problem with that is I'd say things like, and this man killed himself, right? I would never say that to a client now. You know, a better way of wording that is you understand this person caused their own passing. So great place to practice and learn is in these circles. I'm begging you not to take a weekend class in mediumship that gives you a certificate that says now you're a medium and then you go out and engage with the public. I think that's a terrible idea. And everyone has their own number. So people who are professional famous mediums who've been doing this for decades will tell you they're always in development. You're always going to be evolving and changing in your mediumship. Everyone has to pick their own number. For me, I had done at least 200 readings, reading on other mediums, practicing on them before I ever did anything for the public, because I'm very aware of people's grief. And I also strongly recommend against what's called an attack read, which is when you're out in public, like at a market, and you are near someone and you know you've connected with somebody for them. And then you go up to a stranger in public and say, hey, I'm a medium and I know I've got so-and-so for you. Terrible idea. Let me give you an example, a non-mediumship example of that. I got a computer once that had an audio program installed in it already. And everybody in my family sings. So I recorded my speaking voice and then I sang something into it, and it had a filter where you could make a man sound like a woman or vice versa. So I applied the female filter to my voice and I played it back, and there was my mother's voice. I hadn't heard it in years because she'd been passed for quite a while at this point. And I thought that was cool and really interesting because my mom taught me how to speak and how to sing, so it wasn't surprising. really, that it was surprising, but it was a nice surprise that basically I had my mother's voice in a lower register. So I saved the file. And the next time I saw my brother, I told him, I've got this program. I applied a female filter to my voice. Listen to this. And it had only been playing for a few seconds, and he started punching buttons on my computer saying, stop, make it stop, because he was not prepared to hear our dead mother's voice. I still feel kind of bad about that. What I should have said in retrospect is, I've got this audio program. I applied a female filter to my voice. Don't you think it makes me sound like mom? So the point of that story and saying don't do attack reads is nobody needs to be surprise reminded of their loss. It's kind of mean. It can be kind of mean. Also, I want to be really clear in my opinion that people in spirit are always, constantly, always ready to communicate, always. So if you are out in public, say you're handing money to a cashier and you suddenly get someone for them really clearly, the fact that you're connecting is not a sign that you were supposed to give them that information. It does not mean that the recipient is ready to hear what you have to say or what they have to say. So just be respectful of other people's grief. I think that's really important. When you do these circles, so there's lots of them. If it feels wrong, drop it and go to a different one, but then go back to it eventually and see if it was just a bad day. But if it doesn't feel right, do another one. There's plenty of them to choose from, and there's a mix of people in them. Also, you should not be discouraged by no's, because sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes people will say no because you're actually incorrect in how you're interpreting the information. And sometimes people get what John Edwards calls psychic amnesia. I've done this to people, unfortunately, and it's been done to me, where I say, no, I don't understand that, no. And then an hour later, a day later, I think, oh, yes, that was for me. I totally know who that was. But it slipped my mind at the time of the reading. So I also strongly suggest that you make a list of people who you have in spirit, because anybody can come through. I've had a neighbor when I was a child that came through. I had a high school teacher come through before when I was being read by other mediums. And it's not just anyone you know who's passed, it's anyone you know enough about. So like your spouse's deceased grandparent that you've never met, if you know enough about them to recognize the information about them coming through, they can come through. Anybody can come through. When you're sitting waiting for your turn on one of these Zoom calls, these online practice circles, you're going to feel somebody, and it's tempting. It's a huge temptation to start making notes about your connection and then revising them. Wait, not that, it's really this. That's called pre-linking. And I suggest you don't do it. I did it, it was a mistake. It feels good when you're first starting to do this to say, okay, I can go, and you start rattling off information that you've kind of worked out over the previous few minutes while someone else was taking their turn. The problem for me was I did that so much it became a crutch. And so then when I'd be paired one-on-one with somebody, and I had 7 to 10 minutes, I'd sit there for 3 or 4, just sort of feeling out what I thought that connection meant and revising what I wanted to say. And it's not a good idea. Don't pre-link, just do it. And then the final thing I think I want to say about these circles is there can be a social aspect to them, and some of them can become almost as much about checking in with each other, especially in a pandemic, as it is about actually practicing mediumship. And I almost fell into a trap. I caught myself where I was treating them as a little bit of a social thing. So I'd be really busy. I'd realize, oh, it's a minute before the circle starts, and I'd go and I'd log in and I'd read, and those reads were not very good. And so I fortunately quickly started to treat each one of those practice circles as though it was a reading for a client, which in my case means that I would stop whatever I was doing 15 minutes before the circle started. I do my preparation, which I'll talk about in another video. And then when I was ready to read for a client, then I'd log into one of these practice circles. So that's my recommendation on how you can start. There's a lot to say on this subject, but I'm trying to keep each video short and watchable. And as always, if you have questions, put them in the comments and I will try to make a video about them. And thank you for your attention.